Pre-processing. Pre-processing is an optional yet important step and involves bias, dark, and flat frames. The pre-processing operation consists in computing the following equation. Calibrated image equals light minus master dark minus master bias divided by master flat minus master bias. For pre-processing, Siril applies master offset and bias dark and flat frame images to the current sequence. These master images thus have to be processed before processing the actual image sequence. Each layer of the final image must be processed independently before assembling them into an RGB image. Prepare the dark, flat, and bias frames. Bias. Bias frame is an image taken with the shutter closed and the shortest possible exposure time. Basically, it corresponds to an exposure of 1/4000th of a second with modern DSLRs. The bias shows the electronic noise and readout signal of the camera, and the more bias exposures are used for the calculation of the master bias, the less noise will be introduced into the corrected images. Note that bias frames must be taken at the same ISO as the light frames. The master bias frame should be created by stacking bias frames with the median algorithm, or Windsorized by checking the rejection levels at the end of the process. They should be lower than 0.5%, but be sure to use no normalization. Darks. Dark frames are made at the same exposure time and ISO as the subject light frames, but in the dark. Use your lens or telescope cap to close the shutter, for example. They contain the thermal noise associated with the sensor, the noise being proportional to the temperature and the exposure time. Hence, they should be made at approximately the same temperature as the light frames. This is the reason why we made the dark frames at the end or in the middle of the imaging session. Like with the bias frames, the more dark exposures are used for calculation of the master dark frame, the less noise will be introduced into the corrected images. The master dark frame should be created by stacking dark frames with the median algorithm, or Windsorized by checking the rejection levels at the end of the process. They should be lower than 0.5%, but be sure to use no normalization. Remember that dark frames are always composed from real dark signals and bias signal. If you don't apply dark optimization, you can leave the bias signal and your master dark will be in fact master dark plus master bias. In consequence, subtracting the master to the light frames will remove both signals. However, applying dark optimizations make things different by multiplying master dark by a coefficient factor not equal to 1. In most cases, you must subtract master bias from each dark frame. Flat. Telescopes usually do not illuminate the detector homogeneously. Moreover, dust on optical surfaces and sensors lead to dark patterns resulting on the image, and the sensor itself has a different response to the number of photons hitting different photosites. To correct these effects, one needs to divide each light image by the master flat, which should be the medium of the single exposure of a homogeneously and non-saturated illuminated area. Remember that flat frames are always composed from real flat signals and bias signals, so you must subtract master bias from each flat frame to obtain real master flat. In addition, if the flat frame exposures are too long, a dark flat signal should also be removed. Siril automatically evaluates the normalization coefficient used in flat division. However, this value can be self-evaluated. The master flat frame should be created by stacking flat frames with the median algorithm, or Windsorized by checking the rejection levels at the end of this process, which should be lower than 0.5%, and choose multiplicative normalization. For DSLR images. Pre-processing DSLR images without dark optimization. When dark optimization is not used and master flat dark not needed, one good method to process is like this. 1. Integrate all bias to build master bias. 2. Integrate all darks to build master dark. 3. Calibrate flat frames with master bias. 4. Integrate all calibrated flat to build master flat. 5. Process light frame with master dark and master flat. Whole DSLR image processing batch. If you want to do the whole processing batch, once again with no master flat dark, but with dark optimization, you must remove the master bias from the master dark before 1. Integrate all bias to build master bias. 2. Calibrate dark frames with master bias. 3. Integrate all calibrated darks to build master dark. 4. Calibrate flat frames with master bias. 5. Integrate all calibrated flat to build master flat. 6. Pre-process light frames with master bias, master dark, and master flat. Pre-processing and FIT images. The pre-processing does not overwhelm original FITS files from the sequence, but creates new FITS files with pre-processed data. The new file names are the same as the original file names, but prefixed with pp_ if you leave the default value in the prefix box. Make sure that the loaded sequence is the sequence of your light frames. Also, note that at the end of the process, the new sequence is automatically loaded. A tool is available in the Pre-Processing tab, Cosmetic Correction. This tool searches for deviant pixels through master dark and will correct them. You should always use this tool if you have your own master dark frames. Please pay attention to the CFA box. Check it if your monochrome pictures are CFA images. If you don't have master dark, which should be avoided, you could use Automatic Cosmetic Correction tool available throughout the image processing menu. Thank you for your attention. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please feel free to visit our website at siril.org. That's SIRIL.org, and support us if you wish.